Knowledge is power, and this is powerful stuff. Wellness Education Cannabis Advocates of Nevada present the We Can 702 Nevada Cannabis News Hour with the We Can radio team. For the next 60 minutes, we'll take an in-depth look at the cannabis reform revolution sweeping the nation. Now, let's fire up the news hour. Here is the We Can radio team.
Welcome to the Nevada Cannabis News Hour. I'm your host, Kurt Dukach. Today in the studio, I have Michael Nicola. Hello. Perry Haichu. And our guest today is Michelle Fiore.
Hello.
Got to start off today's broadcast with a disclaimer that the views and opinions on today's show are strictly that of the guests. WeCan does not endorse any candidate. We are here to simply educate you about cannabis and the use. So today we're broadcasting live from Worldwide Digital Broadcasting Studios, our new home. So hope you guys like the quality out there. This is much better, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So.
Okay. So let's start off. Perry, you have an interesting story that's a local story, so let's head off with that.
Yes, sir. I came across something along my Facebook thread this morning, and it said it was basically a longtime casino worker has been fired after taking his medical marijuana for a disability. The disability was not stated in the article, but basically what ended up happening was this gentleman has been employed as a surveillance tech at the Plaza Hotel downtown for over a decade. He survived the management change recently, and he came down with a condition that necessitated his use of medical cannabis starting in 2012, and he did not make the company aware of it at that time. And he, according to the story, he brought up to the attention of management that there was asbestos in the building. So in response to that, or so the story goes, they drug tested him, and of course he showed up for marijuana, presented his medical marijuana card, and they fired him. So he went to the news, and he's trying to put the story out there to see what's going on. And of course, NRS 453As we were just talking about doesn't really protect employees, or I guess the way I should put it is it doesn't force employers to to make an accommodation for medical marijuana in the workplace and their drug testing statutes, even though I think that they should. So it's just another in a long line of people lately who have been telling this story, and it's been going on for years since it really became since people started really registering for the program a few years ago, and it's going to continue to be an issue until we eventually clear it up in legislature. So,
and as we know, Nevada is an at-will state to work, and employers can terminate for any or almost no reason. But I can't imagine that if this person had tested positive for opioids with a prescription or almost anything else, that they would have been terminated. And it seems that the legislature made this loophole when they passed this bill. And why do you think that is, Michelle? You were up there.
I actually passed the bill. So there's a lot of loopholes in legislation. This particular piece of legislation is going to continually get amended each session. The biggest issue that I have with this piece of legislation is the firearm clause in it. So I think that a lot of folks aren't getting their medical marijuana card if they're a Second Amendment individual because they don't want to give up their firearm. And so when I think about that, I think about, well, you don't have to give up your firearm if you're on Loratab or Oxycontin or alcohol or any other, prescription medication. So you definitely shouldn't have to give up your firearm because you are using marijuana in a medical way.
Well, when the police arrest someone on marijuana charges and there is a firearm present, they add on the charge of NRS 202.360, which is unauthorized person in possession of a firearm. And the clause that they use in that is that someone who is addicted to a substance cannot have a firearm under the state laws of Nevada. And so the police are making the argument that just because someone registers as a patient and uses cannabis medicinally, that they are an addict. And to me, that's a big issue.
Oh, absolutely. I was denied the purchase of a firearm at the gun store on East Tropicana about a year and a half ago, a beautiful Ruger that I wanted, and I basically had to drag it out of the guy. He wouldn't tell me. He refused. I almost had to threaten him with legal action to try to get him to tell me, hey, look, it was your weed card that prevented you from getting it. And I just kind of threw my hands up in frustration at that point because I realized I was in trouble. Of course, when I went to re-register my concealed weapons permit later that year, same story. Under sheriff came out, he's just like, look, this is the way it's got to be. You can have one or the other. And so that was easy.
This is not a federal issue. This is a state level issue.
They try to kick it up though. They always kind of hide behind that shield. They're like, oh, there's nothing we can do. But really, it's all about the local. I guess it would be the sheriff and his board. I don't know what they call themselves, but the board of directors of the police department here, or whoever they are, that are making these policy decisions. And it's really disappointing that we are disallowed from that, because now I have only one option, which is to open carry if I choose to, which I don't particularly enjoy. It ruins my element of surprise, which is what being concealed is all about, is not being so publicly offensive. I mean, I could choose to do that and carry my 6-inch Colt Python on my hip if I wanted to, but it doesn't make me any friends, so I choose not to, and I try not to draw that attention. So, it's just one of those things. So I would love to be able to quietly, discreetly protect myself once again.
Right, because the element of surprise there is everything.
Absolutely.
If you're open carrying and someone is targeting you, they're going to target you and target that weapon very quickly.
Absolutely. This is very similar to those two police officers who got killed in the CC's Pizza, and the one guy, they ran into the Walmart, and the one guy tried to draw his gun out, ended up getting shot in the back of the head. That story isn't so often told. It's because he was, he put himself out there and it went down. I don't know if it was a concealed versus a open carry thing, but it's just another, just that second of like a surprise cost him his life, unfortunately.
So being in the legislature, Michelle, where do you think that this mindset comes from? Are the people up in the legislature just convinced that anyone who uses pot is a drug-addled zombie or something?
No, I think what we have is a huge issue with people that are legislators that think that they know better than the people. So as a responsible adult, I think we need to preach responsibility, and I think that my peers, our fellow legislators here, have to let us take responsibility for our lives. I really see all of this as more of a revenue generating resource for them, because until we decriminalize marijuana, my big issue is justice reform. And this is exactly the things I'm talking about. When they have all of this legislation on the books, it gives probable cause for people to break in your house and arrest you, and then if you have a firearm, it's more charges. All of this is prisons for profit. It all, I'm sorry to say, but it's all connected. This is why marijuana needs to be legal, to where we take out the element to where they can use legislation against a responsible citizen for responsibly smoking. So that, again, I'm not a smoker or a marijuana user. However, I am pro justice reform, and unless we reform our marijuana legislation, it's a constant revenue generator, and these prisons are full with victimless, violentless crimes that have to do with marijuana.
Let me ask you about prisons. My own feeling is that keeping people housed in prisons and rehabilitating them is part of the public burden that we have to share when we're incarcerating people. And yet there's a bigger trend to go to private for-profit prisons, and the facility in Pahrump, which is a CCA facility, I understand charges something on the order, charges the state $142 a day for a prisoner, and those costs mount up very, very quickly, and are far more expensive than the average $30,000 a year or so that the state system has. So how do you come down on that, the public or private side of that?
Well, first of all, the private prisons, and it's not $142 a day, it's $144 a day.
Pardon me. Inflation.
Yeah. So
my.
it's a huge issue. I want all the private prisons shut down. I mean, and I'm telling you, as a Republican, people go, oh my God, she's a Republican. Yes, I'm a responsible Republican. I really feel, and actually now that I've started visiting these prisons, because even though I have fought for justice reform for the past 5 years, I'm actually now visiting incarcerated individuals that have not been convicted yet, but yet they are treated in society today as they are guilty and they are not presumed innocent. They are guilty. And they have to prove their innocence. And for the most part, it's very difficult for someone to prove their innocence when they're incarcerated, to where they don't have access to the stuff they need to help their attorneys with evidence, with discovery. It is the worst and the saddest and the most corrupt system that I have now started. My eyes are wide open, and now part of my legislative career is to shut prisons down, the prisons for profit down. I want anyone that is in prison with a victimless and violentless crime, I want them out at home, and if they really need to be monitored, put a bracelet on them.
I met an individual who was serving a year in federal prison for Medicare fraud. And whether he did it or not is not the issue. For me, the thought that this guy who was 60 years old or so and had been, he was an oncologist and working as a doctor for decades, the idea that you put him in jail for this, I think it would have better served the community to force him to work 40 or 60 hours a week in a clinic where he was taking care of actual sick people.
Because of his skill set?
Because of his skill set.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when I was growing up that when you got in trouble for drugs, they made you do public service. That was the punishment. Remember all the PSAs that they used to put out from all the famous people that got caught, with a little bit of marijuana or something? That was their punishment. Now we lock them up instead of having them try to do
there's a
something
lot of
good.
money in it. The director of the Corrections Corporation of America, CCA, the largest private prison corporation in the world, or at least in this country, he drives a new exotic car every day to work. I have a friend in Alaska who works for the federal probation system up there and tells me all about it, and it's just like Rolls Royce on Monday, Ferrari on Tuesday, and this and that. And this is what our tax dollars are subsidizing, are extravagant lifestyles by boards of directors that are running private companies. And it's just as simple as that. You better believe they're giving like stock options to each other and like all kinds of fun stuff that people on publicly traded boards of directors do, and their stock does well.
And understand, on these prisons for profit, and even, let me tell you, even our public prisons, they're for profit too, and I'll explain why.
Oh, slave
These
labor.
private prisons that we have for profit that are charging an exorbitant amount, their contracts with each state. Basically, the states guarantee them that they will be at like almost full capacity. So then that's why in the state of Nevada you have our probation, our parole, and our prisons that don't know what one hand is doing with the other, and so they're very confused. They're very disorganized. There's 37 states that have everything under one roof, so the parole and probation officer can talk to the guards, and and they work together. Not here in Nevada. So besides the contracts that are exorbitant, now here, let's go to the public prisons. When I toured the Clark County Detention Center, their capacity was only, 2,000 something that it was supposed to be. I toured that place, and there was cots like in the middle of the block and stuff, and I said, is this like cleanup time or whatever? It was like you were in a daycare, and the kids were about to do nappy time because there was like cots everywhere. And so they're like, no, they're just overcrowded. And so, and when I think about that, and the whole thing that really got me hot on what the hell is going on in our jails, in our city jails, in our county jails, in our prisons, is one of my constituents in AD4. I won't say his name because it's embarrassing, but he is a principal of a school, and he got pulled over on Lone Mountain in 215 for speeding, and there was a warrant out for his arrest, and because the officer ran his plate, he couldn't let him go. He had to arrest him, and the ticket was paid. His wife is a nurse over at Centennial Hills Hospital where my grandson was born, and they paid the ticket 2 years prior. They didn't update the system, and when I was in legislation, there was 875,000, not 875, not 875,500, 875,000 unprocessed tickets, DNA, rape kits, all of this inputted in the computer. So meanwhile, there's so many warrants out for folks' arrests that these tickets were paid for. Now, thank goodness, and let me tell you the wife thought he was missing, because when they detained him, they took all of his stuff away. They took his phone, they took all of his stuff away, and then they said, you can call your wife. but he only knew to press 1 on his phone to call his wife. So then it took another 3 or 4 hours for them to kindly go get his phone, get the phone number, write it on a piece of paper, so then he could use whatever service phones that they have in the jails. But this is pathetic, unwarranted. It took them 14 or 15 hours to get him out, and then come to find out, once someone's detained, and as long as you hit that 14-hour mark, the state or the private prison is able to bill for the full day, for the 24
So they
hours.
make sure that they keep somebody in for
Yes,
that
for
amount.
minimally that
Absolutely.
time. And then, so when you think about that, you know, and if you go on my website, which is WWDBTV.com, and you review some of my videos that I have back from the 2013 session and the 2014 era, you will see Judge Hardesty in particular, literally tell me on video, yes, it's horrible. We do have to stop using our jails as a collection agency, but we haven't figured it out yet. Yes, I did figure it out. In this state, we need to change criminal infractions to civil penalties, as 37 other states do. However, the judges are the ones that came into my Judiciary Committee and opposed the bill because they were afraid they weren't going to be able to collect the fines, which
Wow.
is totally not true. And all of this, so trust but verify what I say. All of this is on my website at votefury.com.
Very Reagan of you. But this is just American exceptionalism. We are number one in the world in incarcerated
Yes.
persons. We incarcerated 5 times the world average, and
Are we
we're not
that
5 times more.
Yeah,
evil.
are we that criminalistic of a society? I thought we were the greatest country in the world, the freest country in the world. That's what I was growing up.
And,
That's
you know,
what they
you're-
told me when I was growing up.
You're looking to go into Congress now, and I saw that there was a congressman just in the past few days who said America's problem is not over incarceration, it's under incarceration.
Yeah,
we
I
need
saw
to
that.
lock more people
Okay,
up.
so that guy, whoever that guy is, this is why we have to get involved, because that guy needs to lose his next election. And I don't care if he's not in this state, but people
And he
that
is not.
understand justice reform, we need to send mailers out from Nevada to his district and say, look, this is, and let me tell you, there's 4 of us sitting at the table. 1 out of every 4 Americans, and I'm going to give you these numbers. And again, Reaganized, trust but verify. So we have 2.7 million convicted, incarcerated, out of 340 million in America. However, we have over 3,000 county jails, counties in America, okay? So, and there's some counties that have 2, 3, 4, 5 jails. Well, let's be conservative. Let's just say each county has a jail, okay? So we'll say 3,000 county jails. That's not including city jails or state prisons. Give you a, for instance, in LA County Jail, they'll house over 10,000 incarcerated, not convicted, waiting to be convicted, incarcerated individuals. So I want you to take that number, times it by 3,000, and we'll bring it down to, let's say, 3,000, okay? Here in Nevada, we have 4, okay? That's 9 to 10 million folks, million. And when I say 9 to 10 million, if you do your research and you do your research and you do your research, you're going to come back to me and you're going to go, Michelle, I'm sorry, you were wrong. It's like 16 million. But let's just bring it to a conservative number, okay? 10 million folks incarcerated, not convicted, out of 340 million people. That's not including the 2.7 million that are convicted. Okay, this is not okay. United States of America incarcerates more than Russia and China, all of their jails combined. This is what we're doing to America. So, people, flock to our country thinking, this is the place of freedom. Well, what I'm going to tell you, the reason why I've made my career to be in politics and to be in the legislature is to change the laws, because the government is free to do whatever it wants. You and I are not. So out of the 4 of us here, the statistics say minimally one of us has either been in jail or will be in jail.
That would be me.
Yeah, we've got a
Absolutely.
confirmation on
I've
it.
been to jail, sure.
Oh, so there's more.
I've been to jail in 3 different states for marijuana
Okay.
possession.
So I think we need to take a break.
And that we're going to take a break. We're going to go to our first commercial break. Make sure you check out our sponsors here. These are the people that make this show possible. So make sure you go into their places and check them out. And we'll be back with some more news with Michelle Fiore.
You're listening to the Weekend 702 Nevada Cannabis News Hour. Now, here again, the Weekend Radio Team.
Welcome back to the Nevada Cannabis News Hour. Today in the studio, we have our guest, Michelle Fiore. So,
And to continue on with what we were saying for criminal justice for a moment, there's a story that comes out of North Carolina in which, in a sharp turn from the war on drugs, the police chief in Nashville, North Carolina, announced in February that drug addicts in his small town would be taken to rehabilitation centers instead of jail. And now, in response to a growing opioid crisis across the state and the nation, the chief is calling on other law enforcement officers across the state to do the same thing. And I think that is a great step forward. And it's not a legislative change. It is not an official policy. But here's a common sense solution coming from conservative middle America that we can't keep locking people up at this rate.
That's correct. So here's the big problem, though. So about 21 years ago, here in our state, because, I like what they're doing in the Carolinas, but here in our state, they shut down a lot of our facilities. They shut down a lot of our mental rehabilitational facilities. And so with that, they all of a sudden combined the mental wards in the jails. So now they're just taking folks to jail. And now here's another crisis. When we look at the jail budget, when we look at our public safety budget, we spend more money incarcerating folks than we do on educating our children. This is why. It's not just $144 a day. Then if you get incarcerated and you're on medication, or you're acting out and they want to medicate you, if you have your inhaler, don't forget when you get incarcerated, you don't get to bring your stuff with you. So if you're a diabetic, if you have high blood pressure, if you have a heart condition, all of those meds, now they have to dispense to you. And unfortunately, the way they have them packaged, if you're there for a day, but they had to open up a package of 4, they waste the other 3 pills, and the taxpayer pays for that. So I like what the Carolinas are doing. However, in order for us to follow suit, we would have to have facilities to take them to.
And so, you're running for Congress now, but you're talking about all these changes that are needed in the state. How can you leave us in such a lurch when we need this help in Carson City?
Well, here's the biggest issue. So as I served 2 terms in Carson City and 2 special sessions, and I sat on 9 different committees, all of the legislation that would come before me, the majority, they would say, we have to pass this law, Michael, because if we don't, we're not going to get matching federal funds. So they have Washington, D.C. dictating and controlling Nevada, and that is not okay. That is why I want to go to Carson's, to Congress. Yeah, to Washington.
And there, obviously what you're talking about are federalist policies, and Nevadans have historically had a great mistrust of the federal government, but in what you're telling us here, that there's a good grounding for that mistrust of what's going on in D.C.
Oh, without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, some of the issues that we fought for diligently this session, and let me tell you, passed unanimously in both houses. I'm going to tell you, Senator Tick Siggerbloom and I work fabulous together on many issues, from justice reform to the marijuana issue. This past session, we had a bill. It was SB 99. It was to remove the federal statutes from AB 579 that happened 8 years ago on sex offenders, keeping all the sex offenders at their own tier, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. So a Tier 1 sex offender, it's someone that moons someone or streaks. A Tier 3 sex offender is someone that raped, killed a child. It's a bad thing. However, matching the federal Adam Walsh Act, they put all the tiers into one. Now all of a sudden, if you're a high school kid and you streaked across the field, now you have to register as a sex offender for the rest of your life because you're as equal as the Tier 3.
Man.
Now, if you've ever had a lewdness charge or any kind of sex charge on you, besides registering, now your neighbors are going to get postcards. Now everyone knows what you drive. So instead of me getting a postcard saying, oh, Michael lives next door to you and he's a sex offender, they don't say, Michael lives next door to you and he mooned his wife, okay? They don't say that. So understand the issues that we're having, and then also understand that any of these sex crimes, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, that happened from 1950 and on. So if there's a 77-year-old guy that, flashed someone back in 1950, and if he's still alive, he's registering starting October of this year. That is disgusting, and I want you to understand, Tick Siggerbloom and I sponsored that legislation. We had unanimous vote in the chambers in Assembly, unanimous chambers in Senate to keep it separate, to keep D.C. out of us. What does our governor do? vetoes
Yeah.
the bill. Okay, it's a problem. It's a big problem.
I saw the same thing in the last session where the governor's wife had a pet project to get a very restrictive opiate bill passed. And at the urging of one of my doctors, I went up and I testified against this. And opioid abuse is a huge problem in this country. There's no doubt about it. Yet, by restricting the access to that, you are condemning these chronic pain patients, the legitimate patients, you're condemning them to a horrible life filled with pain because we can't wrap our hands around this situation in other ways.
So
and
now
that
we
thing
have-
just got ramrodded right through.
So now we have non-elected people dictating legislation.
Well, in the form of the governor's wife, yes. She
That's
led the
great.
charge on that, and that pretty much everybody fell in line behind her. And,
That's the way I understood
yes,
it.
opioid abuse is a terrible scourge in this country, and yet Congress just passed a bill on a rules committee for the opioid bill to prevent opioid abuse, but they're preventing cannabis research as a least harm method. And having been involved in this movement for years, I know any number of people who have stopped their opioid use by using cannabis, and it's been very effective.
But does that mean that they should be automatically and immediately cut off from their opioid medication at the discovery that they're using medical cannabis?
No,
which is
it
kind
just
of
makes
the-
it much harder for the doctor because they're forcing they've set up a state database that monitors how many prescriptions a doctor is writing.
Okay.
And so they're saying if you're in the top 5% or whatever, that all of a sudden you're under increased state scrutiny. Well, if you're an oncologist treating terminal cancer patients, you're going to have a higher than average number of painkiller recommendations.
So they're targeting the doctors now.
Yes,
And they
they're-
want to kind of put the squeeze on them.
Exactly.
Kind of stop it at the source, supposedly.
And all that's going to do, really, is take the expensive industrial pharmaceuticals and make them not available to people. And so a number of those people are going to turn to the street where they can pick up heroin for a tenth of the cost. And now we have a real problem.
And we're seeing that here in Nevada. We've had an increase. A few articles I've seen now. We've had a real spike in the heroin use and the abuse of heroin in Nevada.
I think it's really misreported. I saw something about that today on the news. They were like, oh, there's all these heroin things. And I've lost a couple of friends of mine to heroin use, young people. One when he was 18, one when he was 26. It was terrible. And when the certificate of death came, the cause of death was not drug abuse or drug addiction, or what do they call that, overdose. It was like asphyxiation due to this or the other, but they always misreport that because that was the actual cause of death. Is okay, he choked to death, but why? Why did he choke? It was obviously the drugs he was taking, but I feel like I'm not exactly sure why, but these statistics are not reported accurately a lot of the time, and I am almost wondering whether it's done purposefully or whether it's done purely scientifically, whether this was the specific cause of death, but there's no underlying reasoning behind it. So when they're addressing these spikes, it's much worse than it's actually being reported. And so I'm just curious as to why they're not putting that down. Maybe it's a policy thing or it's an individual hospital decision, or I don't know why.
I think because again, our legislators and the different agencies believe that Americans can't handle the truth. So if people actually understood that people were dying from overdosing on drugs, that would be an alarm. That would be definitely cause to be alarmed. So when you look at even our crime statistics, they're skewed. Okay? They're just skewed. Why? Because when you look at stats, you have to have these stats in a balanced order. So the agencies and the paperwork is stringent, so they are taught that how to write a death certificate up, and it should definitely be the truth.
So I can tell that you've got a passion for this, and I'd like to explore a little bit more about where that came from. You and I apparently grew up across the Verrazano Bridge from each other,
Right.
myself on Staten Island, you in Brooklyn. And it's odd because Staten Island's a Republican stronghold and Brooklyn is a Democratic stronghold.
I know.
But we're reversed there. So how
Yeah.
did a good Brooklyn girl like you turn into a Republican and get so passionate about politics?
Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't always passionate about politics. But when I started started learning that these hayseeds, and I'm talking about legislators in Carson City, were creating legislation that involved, overburdensome regulation, overburdensome taxation, these fees, just horrific things. At first I thought to myself, gosh, these guys must have their PhD in, economics. They really must know what they're doing, but even though they're killing, little guys. So then when I found out that at the time that I got passionate about politics, that my state senator who implemented the MBT tax was an ambulance driver and he never signed the front of a paycheck, I thought to myself, okay, so these guys that are writing legislation don't walk in the people's shoes that they're affecting, and that's an issue. So then I started doing my research on who the hell is in the legislature. We've got a waitress, we've got an ambulance driver, a real estate agent. It's a citizen legislature.
And that's not bad in itself.
It's not bad in itself, but at the same time, it's not balanced. So you have folks that, if, for instance, I don't know a lot about marijuana, okay? So I doubt you want me making you marijuana soap or marijuana I don't know about it, okay? So I just think that we need more folks when they're writing legislation to actually wear the folks' shoes that they're writing the legislation that it will affect.
And it's interesting. I've been saying for a few years about the legislature up there that you talk to 90%, you talk to everybody with TIC, and they'll say, oh, I've never smoked marijuana. I don't know anybody who smokes marijuana. In fact, I don't even know anything about marijuana. So let's start passing some laws about it.
That's right. That's right. So let me tell you what TIC says. TIC says, I'm sorry, it's so ticklish. But TIC, when we were touring the facilities, TIC was like, wow, those are a great bud. TIC TIC has his own strand after him now.
Yes.
Yes.
Cigar Bloom Hayes.
Cigar Bloom Hayes, yes. And so you sent me a photo called Bella Fiore, a strand of Bella Fiore. Someone sent me a strand of Bella Fiore. And I think that, again, because I don't know a lot about marijuana and what I'm learning about it, this is what I know about it. I have friends that smoke it, and they're successful, and they're fine, and they're responsible adults. Is it medical? Probably not. However, when my friends smoked it 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they weren't getting tested in labs, and they weren't doing any of this stuff. And there's a lot of marijuana that, before medical marijuana came in use, and now we have all of these great organic, vitamin waters and dirts, and, the really nice way to grow marijuana. I'm just wondering to myself, is there really a difference between the Mexican weed or the vitamin C marijuana? The bottom line is, when you look at it, is the industry overregulated because, again, they're gouging and they're making legislation and it's profiting the state? Or is there something to it? What I'm seeing as a legislator is this business in the state of Nevada. There's no other business that has been regulated and gouged as much as this business. Not the alcohol business, not the casino industry, not the gambling, not even prostitution.
No.
I
could open a whorehouse much easier than a
you can
dispensary.
definitely open. I'm thinking, shoot, I might as well open up the cock ranch instead of the chicken ranch. Just saying. So, but what I'm saying, you think about these things, and why is it? Why is it that the legislatures have become quite unfair to this industry?
That's a good question. It's mostly, I think, because of the hippie stoner stereotype, and this Nevada has always been a hippies versus cowboys type of environment. So I think that's a lot about it. But I'd like to touch back on something that you said just a little earlier, which was that these legislators are adding fees and doing all this sort of stuff. And normally, from someone on your side of the aisle, you would be pointing your finger over to Democrats. But I really see it happening on both sides, because your main opponent in the upcoming primary got himself elected on essentially a no taxes pledge.
Lord, I know.
And then helped pass the largest tax increase in the history of the state. Now,
right after we voted against it in the
Ford
Bell initiative,
and the thing is that even though everything that I hear is that he's very unpopular with the base because of that, the party seems to still be supporting him, making him the fair-haired boy, and I think the other people who are running in the primary are just lesser candidates. But with him, he's amassed this big war chest, and after abandoning his base, I don't understand it.
And I have to tell you, you think about that opponent. We're talking about Senator Majority Leader Michael Roberson, who did basically push through the largest tax hike in the state's history. 50 years. And he did promise, and he did sign the tax protection pledge that he wasn't going to. However, again, these legislators, I don't know what happens when they leave Clark County and they get up to the north. All of a sudden they forget about their constituents. They forget about their promises. Or they come to the conclusion that, oh my, I am a state representative now and I know a whole hell of a lot better what's good for my constituents than I did before I was elected. That basically tells me he got a lot of fat checks from lobbyists that say this is what we need you to do. Because a lot of folks are under the misconception that we have three branches of government. We have our executive branch, which is Brian Sandoval's office. Then we have the legislature branch, which they call us the Gang of 63, 21 state senators and 43 assembly people. And then we have the judicial branch. But no one wants to talk about the lobbying branch and the lobbyist and who writes the checks. I mean, when we're up at the legislature for the 4 or 5 months, we have lobbyists pushing their bills through. The majority of the over 1,000 bills that I read, they were all sponsored by a lobbyist, putting it in the hands of a legislator, saying, I need you to do this. And meanwhile, while they're campaigning, this is how it goes. This company will come and say, listen, I can max out to you for $10,000. Here's the legislation I need you to represent. Okay? That branch. And so the legislator, they're like, okay, great, $10,000. That'll get me, a mailer. That'll get me yard signs. Forget it. There's been twice that I've literally sent lobbyists back their checks and said, you're not allowed in my office. Take your money and go to charm school because you're obnoxious. And so I would prefer to vote for our next generation than my next election. So yes, I fundraise. Yes, I ask people for dollars to buy those signs, but no, my vote's just not up for sale.
And it's a situation where this happens on both sides of the aisle. It's
without
not one party
without a doubt.
But I'm familiar in one case with ALEC, which is a very conservative legislative council. And what they're doing is they take these bills and they pre-write them, and then they find their anointed representatives in every state house, and they say, here's the bill we want you to pass. And it does happen on both sides. And
without a doubt.
It shouldn't happen on either.
Well,
So I guess we need to take another break, and but this is fascinating
Yes,
conversation.
it's fun. It's fun.
So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
And we're
Welcome back.
All right. Michelle, let me ask you, you're talking about fundraising, and we see how the lobbying industry really controls a lot of the legislative agenda. There's been a lot of talk about public financing of campaigns, and there's a lot of difference as to whether the people should pay for this, but to my mind it sort of levels the playing field, and from what I have heard from people who are in office, the single thing they hate the most about being in office is that they get locked away in a room and they have to make fundraising calls and do this for hours a day sometimes. So where do you stand on this issue on public financing?
So public financing is a big problem, and this is why, Michael, because all of a sudden if we use taxpayers' dollars to basically supplement our campaign, the richest man wins, and this is why. Because the one with the most money, they'll take the public donations and then they'll spend their own money behind the scenes. So that makes it a total unequal level playing field, however you're going to write that.
But is that more unequal than the playing field we have now? Because we're already in a situation where the wealthy can raise everything that they want, and with super PACs that are not supposed to coordinate, but they kind of do in many cases. So obviously it's a thorny issue then, and there's no easy solution.
It's a very thorny issue, and there's no easy solution at all on this particular, because I think to myself, I have to call and ask for my supporters to say, hey, I need to do this sign. And then when you have, other folks that are in the race that are conservative or whatever, and our base is the same, it really makes it difficult to do that. So again, it's it's just a very difficult situation, and this is something I just don't see being fixed anytime soon.
Well, then, as for things that can be fixed, if you were to get into Congress, where do you come in on the issue of rescheduling or descheduling cannabis? Are you are you more with Bernie to deschedule it entirely, or are you more with Hillary to move it to Schedule 2? Or, well, Donald changes his position a lot, so I'm not really sure. But where do you stand on cannabis?
I stand with Bernie on this. Number one, it needs to be descheduled, period. It needs to be descheduled. And why? Simply, again, it goes back to justice reform. I'm sorry, but it is responsible adults, and no matter, people say, well, if if it's so easily accessible, then kids are gonna, do it. Listen, kids are gonna do what kids are gonna do. Adults are gonna do what adults are gonna do. Again, it's back to being a responsible human being. I don't care if you're a responsible Democrat, a Republican, independent, libertarian. Be responsible, period. And that's what it's going to take. And let me tell you, I'm going to start harping on this because I never have. But I'm going to start harping on being responsible about voting. I don't care who you vote for. I don't care if you vote against me, okay? If you don't vote, shame on you. If you're sitting here listening to the problems that we're having and you turn around and this is what I hear, oh, the system's corrupt and, no one's going to fix it. It's corrupt because you're not involved. It's corrupt because you're not spending your time at that voting booth. It's corrupt because of you. The people that don't vote allow the system to be corrupt, and that's just the facts.
I think in the 2014 election, something like 14% of
it was
eligible
disgusting
voters
number.
voted. Which for those of us who do vote, it means our vote counts 7 times as much.
Do you believe that Election Day should be a national holiday?
Yes. I would vote for that.
I would go for that also.
I would vote for that, absolutely. And here's the thing, everyone has to vote.
Yeah.
Everyone, you're going to take the day off from work, you better bring your I voted sticker
Well,
back.
that's the whole thing. Is there? I saw a little internet meme, and people are complaining like, "Oh, I can't go to work. I got to go to work. It's on a Tuesday or whatever." And then, of course, if an iPhone were to be released on a Tuesday, you better believe the crowds would be out the door. So it's just a matter of what do you make time for?
And now
what's important to you?
we have early voting, and it's you don't have to take that day. I mean,
Okay,
you got the month before to find a day to go to. They have them at the grocery store.
So should we go follow
You know?
Oregon and automatically register everyone to vote that goes through the DMV automatically?
And they have voting by mail
Right.
as well. So do you think that these are good solutions?
I like the voting by mail because, understand, I was in the healthcare industry for a long time, and a lot of my patients were bedridden, so their only option was to vote by mail. So I like voting by mail and you actually, when you look at the voter registration and you look at the year, the birth year of the people that are voting by mail, they're generally 70 plus.
And I feel I've got to point this out because you are so not a standard Republican on this. You can look at voting reform and what's happening across the country, and in many conservative states that are Republican ruled, they're looking to limit access to the polls because smaller elections with a largely white electorate are going to be better for the Republican Party. And the idea of really having everybody vote seems to be more in favor. Oregon is a very blue state, and yet I've got to commend you on this. I absolutely agree. It's the right and the responsibility of every American to be out there of voting age and vote in every election. Yeah, it's a job, but so what?
It's crucial for the voters to be educated at the same time, though. When you have people, when I was doing voter registration, back before I was working for you, during some of these campaigns, you would have people walk straight up and just be like, Obama, he's the Republican, right? It's just like, yeah, sure, dude, check that box at that point. Like, and it's just people are so clueless. Yeah, they don't care. And it's just, it's hard to say, oh, we should have, on the flip side of that, we should just have everyone vote when you have a disproportionate amount of people who have no knowledge of the process and they believe what they're told to believe. So when they're told to believe something and a vast majority of the population is told you should vote for this party because of the following and vote right down the ticket, that's a problem also on both sides.
It really is, and I think it addresses back to education, where you need to, in junior high school and in high school, in civics classes, teach the kids the importance of voting and how to do this. Let me just ask you also before we go, being from New York City, you, I, Donald Trump, we speak our mind a lot.
We do.
And it gets all of us in trouble.
It always my vernacular gets me in more trouble than I
So do you think that Nevada is ready for a straight talk and blunt forward person in the halls of Congress?
I do, and I think we need it because Nevada, we're a little too much behaved here, and I think that the freedom of speech and the truth to the voters have to commingle, because always making sure your hair is in place and you smile and shake hands and kiss the babies just isn't cutting it anymore. The people need a real, honest, down-to-earth representative that will represent them, all of them, and not just a party.
Well, speaking of that, you broke with your caucus in 2013 and voted for our medical marijuana bill. And you were the deciding vote of that. And, I was a proud Republican until that day when I saw my caucus turn against what I thought was a very hard-fought, negotiated bill at the last second due to, I don't want to put it out there because I wasn't really in those
pharmaceutical
back rooms,
industry money.
Yeah, there was some money that came in at the last minute that damn near killed our bill if it wasn't for you. And I just need the cannabis, the medical cannabis supporters that watch this show to remember that when they're going to the polls. How easily people forget the "What have you done for me lately?" is so often, but we cannot forget that fateful day. Why did you break with the caucus that day? Why weren't you a good soldier that day?
So I generally break with my caucus because I only vote with the people. So a lot of people have to understand that when I vote, it is for our next generation. It is not for my next election. That was a very combative vote. And when I say combative, I mean I was in my caucus room fighting with my fellow Republican members and them basically telling me if I pass this bill, because it's my one vote will pass medical marijuana in the state of Nevada, and if I do, I will not be back. Well, not only did I come back the next election cycle after they spent over $1 million to unseat me in an assembly seat, I came back beating the competitor by like 30 points. And I'm in a Democrat district as a Republican. So understand, the people are hearing it. Now we've got to do the same thing in the congressional race. And a lot of the marijuana people need to know that I did stand with them, and now I need them to stand with me. If they can't vote for me because they're not in Congressional District 3, write a check and send it in to www.votefiore.com.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I hope that message is well received.
Yeah, that's right. So, and if you'd like to meet Michelle, tomorrow you're doing out in Boulder City, you're doing a meet and greet, right?
We're doing a meet and greet in Boulder City at the Elaine Smith
Center?
at the Elaine
At
Smith.
700 Wyoming Street. We'll put it up on our Facebook page, and if you're interested in going out there, check it out and come on out and meet Michelle in person. So.
Yeah, please pop by and have some pasta and wine and cannolis with me.
And I'd just like to close on the fact that, being so plainly spoken and controversial, the mainstream media and the mainstream party tries to paint you in a very unfair way as an extremist and as somebody who can't be trusted. But I hope that our listeners today have seen that you are very common sense, center of the road, mainstream America on a lot of these positions. And we can disagree on any number of things, but certainly there would be a lot of sense in having someone in Congress like yourself. I wish you the best of luck in your primary and hope you make it through to the November election.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you.
That's right. And other events we have coming up tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the UNLV Hank Greenspun Center. The Grove is hosting Breaking Barriers to MMJ Research. There's going to be Dr. Sue Sisley is going to be there speaking. We have Tick Seegerbloom is going to be there. Patricia Farley and Eugene Monroe from the NFL just recently came out in favor of cannabis. We have Patient's Choice coming up this Saturday. Check it out on our Facebook. Then on Sunday we have our weekend potluck and fundraiser for our good friend Dabber Dennis, who's in the hospital still. He's doing well. I just visited him this week, so we're raising some money to help him out. Then next week we have First Friday on Friday, June 3rd. We'll be out there selling our dope soaps and socks. And then Las Vegas Hemp Fest on Saturday, June 4th. So look it all up. It's all on our website, www.wecan702.org. If you're interested in supporting Michelle, it's votefiore.com. So, and with that, it's been a great show. And
It has indeed.
we'll see you all next week.
Thank you,
Thank
Michelle.
you. Thank you for having me.